Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we've got Tuesday NBA here after that little 5-game Christmas Day slate. Hope everybody had a great holidays. We are rolling along here with we got 9 games to choose from on Tuesday, so plenty to come back to here in the NBA this week. We've got best bets in this video. We also have another one up with play of props, so go ahead and like and subscribe to that page. Follow along all season with us. Also want you to head to thelines.com. Use that odds finder tool that we're using every day for these play of props and the like. Make sure you're getting the best juice available to you from all of these books that are giving us bets this season. Great day on Christmas for us. We had an early look-ahead video there, Nate, and we had a bunch of things right in the best bets, 4-0, 2-0 in the play of props as Joel Embiid didn't go, and there's no way we would have taken Tyrese Maxey 31.5 points against the Miami Heat in that one. Everything just sort of thrown out the window when Embiid doesn't play, but feeling really good. We move along here on these best bets, like I said, so let's jump right into your first one here, Nate.
Yeah, Jazz only minus 3.5 right now. It's been creeping up at San Antonio. Wemby questionable. Jazz have their guys back. I think that spread is too small. I mean, the Jazz were awful on the road, certainly to start the season, but this is a fantastic matchup against a team that is legitimately terrible and not even trying. And, we don't even know if Popovich is coaching at halftime, basically, because their second half numbers have been so embarrassingly bad that it's just not even funny. I mean, since they snuck out a win against the Lakers, negative 30 net rating in the second half. On the season, they have the second worst in the second half in general. And the Jazz are playing well. I mean, just outscored the Raptors by 20 in the fourth quarter in their last road game. That's a second straight road win for a team that just didn't even come to play on the road. But now we see Markkanen off the minutes limit, 28 points per game on fantastic shooting in his last 2. They put up numbers despite Clarkson having a dud in his first game back at Cleveland. Then he goes for 30 off the bench. You got Sexton and Dunn now in the starting lineup, and that's a far more efficient, dependable unit than when you had Keontae George running your offense as a rookie. Chris Dunn, 13 assists against the Raptors, very impressive. I mean, even the Jazz B team was able to beat the Spurs last time they faced them. I mean, THT dropping 41 with nobody else playing offense in a late season meeting the last time they got together. Like I said, the last 4 for the Spurs after that rare win, 127 defensive rating, negative 22 net, only getting 110 a game. Their second half numbers are terrible. The Jazz in their last 4, 130 offensive rating in the second half, the best rebounding rate, the third fewest paint points allowed, plus 20 net to go 3-1 down the stretch against some much better teams than this. And their biggest weakness is they're allowing points off turnovers, and the Spurs don't force turnovers, especially if Wemby's out. I mean, their defense is just a real sieve. They're not going to be forcing as many turnovers, and they've really fallen apart with him getting injured against the Bulls, and I think 2 or 3 games ago.
Seems reasonable. I keep coming back to this Jazz team because they do have a decent bench. It is similar to how they were last year, where it was like, I don't know, there's still some NBA players on this team that can score. That was why I wasn't ready to jump on the train of them losing to Detroit and giving Detroit their first win of the season. And win of the season, basically first win of the season, third win of the season, first win in forever since the Reagan administration. But yeah, the same concept here for the Spurs with the Jazz just being a better team, and I do think that they'll continue to beat the teams that they are better than. So let's go to another game that I think it'll be good, but if you're a Houston fan, I think it'll be good. They're taking on the Pacers at Houston, minus 2.5 for the Rockets on the spread there, and that's what I'll take here. Indiana's not good in these situations. I mean, they've played the West pretty poorly so far this season, not good in non-conference games. They are going a bit under against these other teams as well, at least when they play on the road. They did go way over against the Clips at home recently, but when they played Memphis in Memphis, a 103-90 game that Memphis won, and they also lost to Minnie on the road recently, 109-91. On the road, like I said, against these two teams, everybody playing. There's no Bruce Brown tonight as well, who does have the second best on-off rating for this team in terms of offensive rating. He and Tyrese are basically mirroring each other, almost the same exact minutes, basically the same on-off numbers, and that's what I mean by mirroring each other in terms of how important they are to this team and to this offense, especially. They both have a 124 on-court offensive rating. The Pacers have that when they're on the floor. when they're both when one of them is off the floor, it's a 114. It goes from a 114 defensive rating up to about a 121 defensive rating. So just even these two guys playing is so crucial in the midst of games, much less the entirety of a game like Bruce Brown's going to miss in this one. And then the matchup, Houston, awesome at everything at limiting everything that the Pacers want to do, and just magnify that, multiply it when they play at home. That defense at home is number one in the league right now when they're in Houston. They have the best defensive rating at home. They limit teams to the fewest transition points per game wherever they are, and especially at home. They also limit teams to the fewest points per game off of their turnovers at home, and third on the road, because they're not really, it's Ime Udoka. Like, that's take care of the ball, get back on defense. If you don't get back on defense, you will find yourself on the bench. Ask Jabari Smith, who's been doing a much better job as of late, and that's why his minutes are skyrocketing, because he's finally rebounding and running back in transition and blocking shots, etc. So we'll talk about him in a bit, but they also allow very few second chance points, third fewest at home in the league, because their defensive rebounding is much better at home as well. And the free throw rate should be a pretty big discrepancy here as well. Houston 10th in free throw attempt rate, and Indy, as we know, just allows you to get to the free throw line at will. It's just a real procession line of people getting to the free throw stripe against this Indy team, and I think we'll continue to see Houston attacking, going into the paint. We know that they drive a lot at home. They actually have a top 5 in terms of how often they're cutting to the basket, scoring off of drives, scoring off of cuts to the basket as well. Like, their offense is very fine-tuned at home. It's not like the sexiest thing in the world, because they still could use a lot of three-point shooting, to be honest with you. That's where they're low. But everywhere else, in terms of getting to the bucket, I think they're going to have a good time doing that against this Pacers team.
Yeah, you originally liked the under as much as you liked Houston in this, right? I mean, there is always that nice correlation that the Rockets, it's hard to imagine them winning a game that goes over 240, right? We're at like 237 here with the Pacers, and they've been shut down by these solid defenses on the road. Ime Udoka at plus 1,400 for Coach of the Year as pretty good value. I mean, it depends if the voters have to give it to a team that's like in the top of the standings, because right now Wolves and Thunder are getting the shortest odds in terms of their coach. But the biggest turnaround is certainly Udoka and what he's done immediately with this team.
Yeah, I don't think you need to be a top 5 seed in either conference to really have a coach win this Coach of the Year award. We saw Tibbs do it last year with the Knicks as a 5 seed in there. And then, as far as like where we're at in the odds this year, Tibbs was like 30-1 to win Coach of the Year in like January or maybe even February last year. He had ridiculous odds for some reason. Not 31, but it got down by like January, February, but it was still double digits, like 15, 18-1 in that area for a good portion of the 2023, the beginning of the year. So like, I do agree with you. I think you're getting ahead of a really good opportunity, because I don't think the Rockets are going away.
Yeah, and my next pick here, Pelicans minus 4.5 against the Grizz. It's revenge time. It is time to make some adjustments and stop Ja Morant from embarrassing you again. The Pelicans were dominating this first matchup. They were up 22 shortly before halftime, and then, we know what happened. Ja took over, and now the Grizzlies might be a little overpriced after just blowing up against the Pacers and Hawks, maybe the two worst defenses in the league. You might get Marcus Smart back, which I don't think helps your offense. Certainly not with him shaking off some rust here. But, I mean, this is more to me about what the Pelicans can do defensively and what they have done defensively against this team in general. Their game log against the Grizz is pretty encouraging because, I mean, they won earlier this season with no Ja, obviously, but shut down the Grizz from 3. 28% from 3 for them, out-rebounded them. They won their previous 2 at home against the Grizz. Ja missed one of those. They still held the Grizz to 102, with Ja getting 36 in the previous meeting, and the Grizz shot just 26% from 3. The Grizz, terrible assist-to-turnover ratio. Basically, every time they face this Pelicans defense, which is not really a coincidence. Memphis has the 6th worst assist-to-turnover ratio on the road this season. And the 2nd worst in their last 3 since they got Ja back. New Orleans set 9th best in that department at home. Also the 4th best 3-point defense at home. So none of this is a fluke in terms of like, look, Ja might be able to get his going to the rim. He might get 30 again. But the rest of this Grizzlies offense is still a really sad state of affairs. Like, unless Jaren Jackson has a rare spike game, which you don't necessarily see happening against a solid defense, like, Bane's been all right against this team. I could see him getting shut down a little bit. I mean, with all the wing defense that the Pelicans can throw at them, The Pels in their last two beat Cleveland without Zion, and then lost to Houston because a bunch the two skilled bigs, right, Şengün and Jabari, go off. They still had a 112 defensive rating in those last two. Clearly piqued their interest, turning it around after Ja beat them down the stretch in this matchup. So I just think it's time for them to bounce back. If you don't like the spread, or if it creeps up too much, I would tease it with Orlando. They're -7 at Washington, and we saw Orlando beat Washington by double digits twice. Like, everything indicates Orlando has the edge in that matchup.
Yeah.
But either way, I think I trust the Pels to win this game.
Yeah, just to touch on the Magic thing, I was looking at it. We were talking about it earlier before we started recording, and neither of us went with it. But there's probably like a Paolo 20 plus points and the win for Miami for Orlando in there that you could really book because of how bad Washington is against power forwards. It's a scary thought when he had 6 points in their first matchup, but that was a different game. I can't even tell how many minutes he played. Not very many.
That was weird.
Second game came back for 28, right? And that's where you score against this Washington team, is from the power forward position, from an athletic guy who wants to attack the rim, who's versatile like that. So definitely like Paolo to get some points in there. It's 25 total as core line, but I agree with you on that game. In this game, I was looking at maybe Memphis to win again, but it was just blindly like, well, this just keep riding with Memphis. But you're right when you look at the way that the Pelicans had this game in hand, and then Ja did Ja stuff in a sort of magical moment for him. Then they come back and have a home game. They weren't going to lose that first game at home with Ja when they beat the Pacers, and then they played a bad team in Atlanta, and I'm calling them a bad team on the road. So yeah, that makes sense that you would get a little bit more value here on them at 4.5 than maybe they should be favored or at least even down by. But let me close things out here talking about the Chicago Bulls and that awful Atlanta Hawks team, and just take the Bulls -1.5. And mea culpa, and sorry to anybody who's following me on social and took the Bulls -4.5, -5 against the Cavs third stringers. Don't know how I was supposed to read that the Bulls were going to lose a random game after surging like that to a bunch of backups. But that's the NBA, and it was a Saturday before everybody was going home for Christmas. So now we're back, and the Bulls are back in business. They're very good against Trae Young and against point guards, because Alex Caruso is very good against Trae Young and against point guards, which we've seen with him repeatedly throughout this matchup. And so the only time Trae's actually gone over 30 points when Caruso was in the game for the Bulls, it was in Atlanta. And I believe also DJM was out in that game, DeJounte Murray. So that was a different scenario. I do think we're going to be able to see Trae get under the 25, 28 points in that range that he's projected to get with that. And that does just stifle this team, right? He has got 17.5 points a game in his last two, shooting 30% from the field, 5 turnovers a game. Like I said, very good defensive matchup for the Bulls here. But just as important, they are 8-4 now since Levine went out. They were 8-3 before that Cavs loss. And they are 10-2 against the spread in that time as well. So it's basically a pick 'em. You're just taking the Bulls to win at home, a fully healthy Bulls team that shouldn't be missing anybody other than Levine, which is good for them, apparently. They've gone up to 12th offensive rating since that time. They were 26th in the league when Levine was in. Everything just skyrockets up. Their defensive rating also much better, 7th in the league over those last 12 games versus 22nd in the league previous to that on the season. So the last thing I would just say that I love is the rebound percentage and the assist percentage for this team. Just saying that this team is 17th in the league in assist percentage over the last like 3 weeks is a big deal. The 17th doesn't sound very good, but it's much better than dead last, which is what they were and what they continued to be over the course of the last 3 years, was bottom 5, bottom 3 in terms of how often they were assisting on their field goals that they made. Just not the case anymore. Patrick Williams, not as big of a liability right now because he's actually not getting quite as many minutes. And he's a huge reason, in my opinion, that they were so bad at rebounding, and especially defensive rebounding, because their power forward is standing outside the 3-point line the whole game. And that's been a little bit more of them getting other guys in as well to get into the paint and bang down low. We've seen a bit more Drummond come in as well, which really helps that rebound percentage and should continue to lock up guys like Capella and Okongwu. So I'm riding with the Bulls, basically a pick 'em in this one at home.
Yeah, I was kind of on the other side of this one when I first looked at it, because I think Jalen Johnson's coming back, and I can't understate how important he was for the Hawks early in the season and how bad they've been without him on both sides. But I mean, we don't know what kind of minutes limit he'll be on. And then you see the line flip because Trae is legitimately questionable tonight.
Right.
Some places listed as out, maybe. Some places he has props up. But you do mention that they've limited Trae in recent meetings, the Bulls. But I mean, I just look at the Hawks dropping 124 in Houston and think like this team has too much offensive firepower, especially if they get Johnson back. for even this Bulls defense to hold them down. Bulls are starting, they had that initial kind of like new coach lift, if you will, aka Levine being out, new look, and now they're sort of kind of regressing back to the mean where they were. So I don't know. I'll have to see where Trey's at. I think if you buy this now at a pick 'em and then Trey Young sits, you'd feel pretty
Right.
good for the Bulls because it's not a situation where Trey is hurting the Hawks on defense or anything. He's playing really good ball right now and has been the most essential player for them.
Of course, yeah, of course. He'll continue to be, and I agree. That's a part of why I'm happy to just bring it right now and not even put out that sort of disclaimer of like, wait to see what happens with Trey. Like I'm just hitting it now. If Trey does play, it's not like I'm gonna buy more of it. But if Trey doesn't play and this doesn't move much further than like 2.5, 3.5 in that range, still might hit the Bulls again. So that's how I'm playing this one, and that is all the time that we have for you in this one. So go ahead and like and subscribe to that page. Check out the play of props that we also have up for you. And until we see you next, happy betting.